December 13th meeting of the Planning Commission to order and announce two things. As you've noticed, we were changing chairs around. The very happy note is that Commissioner Middleton is now City Councilor Middleton, and she has moved from Planning Commission to City Council. On a much sadder note, Commissioner Lowe passed away over Thanksgiving, and we are opening the meeting today in his memory, and we'll be doing a presentation for him in just a few minutes. Can we have the roll call, please?
Commissioner Donenfeld?
Present.
Hirschbein?
Present.
Hudson?
Present.
Vice Chair Kellerdyne?
Present.
Chair Wormick?
Present.
We have a quorum.
A report on the posting of the agenda.
Madam Chair, the agenda was posted on Thursday, December the 7th. This meeting has been noticed and posted in accordance with state law.
In terms of the acceptance of the agenda, I'm going to make some suggestions for changes of the agenda as a motion and see if I get a second. The first is that item 5A be moved to the consent calendar. That's an internal, there's a second on that. The second is that the 2C, which is the Avalon project, the name change, be moved to the first item in the public hearings. The third is that we change the order of 4A and 4B to hear 4B ahead of 4A. We anticipate a lot of public comment, to be a longer item. 4A will be a longer item than 4B, so to change the order on that. And then to move the presentation ahead of public comment. Do I have a second?
I'll second all this.
Can you call the roll on that?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
I don't know. I was just asked if my voice would crack, and I'm not quite sure. But we'll see, and if it does, I will hand this to Commissioner Donenfeld. Randy's brother, Michael, is with us today. Michael, would you come up? For those of you who don't know, Randy was with us for 4.5 years. And whereas Planning Commissioner Randy Lowe has dedicated his life to public service, equality, and civil rights. I'm not very good at emotion.
Whereas Planning Commissioner Randy Lowe has dedicated his life to public service, equality, and civil rights, and whereas Randy began his career of service by enlisting in the Peace Corps after finishing his undergraduate work teaching English and mathematics in Ghana, and whereas Randy's many volunteer positions include having served on the Lieutenant Governor's One California Commission, serving as the chair of the Governor's Committee on the Employment of Individuals with Disabilities, serving as the chair of the Gay Men's Counseling Collective, serving as board member of the Nonviolence Program in the high schools, serving as a volunteer counselor at the Whitman Walker Clinic, and was a volunteer and founding member of the Denver LGBT Community Center. And whereas Randy's professional career included positions with the federal government dealing with affirmative action and civil rights, as well as serving as the diversity officer and senior vice president for employment at Union Bank. And whereas Randy was appointed as a member of the Golden Rainbow Senior Center when he moved to Palm Springs in 2008, and quickly assisted in the reorganization of the center to become a full-service community center for the entire LGBT community. And whereas Randy served as the board chair of the LGBT Community Center until August 2015, and continued to serve as board chair emeritus. And whereas Randy was appointed as a planning commissioner on July 3rd, 2013, and served faithfully in that capacity until his untimely passing in November 2017. And now, therefore, on behalf of the Planning Commission of the City of Palm Springs, we recognize Randy Lowe for his many excellent accomplishments, his public service to our community, and do hereby issue this proclamation in honor of Randy on this 13th day of December 2017, signed by all members of the current Planning Commissioner, as well as our former Commissioner Lisa Middleton and former Commissioner J.R. Roberts, who are both now on City Council.
And former Commissioner Philip Klatchko, all three of whom served with Randy. And now I can speak a little bit better. Those of us may want to say a few words. It was just a tremendous pleasure to work with him. He was exactly what you hope for from a community member who doesn't start out schooled in planning issues, but has an excellent sense of what the community needs and what is good for the community. He was a wonderful member of this commission. We just want to thank his family for lending him to us for 4.5 years. Would anybody else would like to say anything?
I just want to say that in addition to serving with Randy as a fellow planning commissioner, I really had the privilege of getting to know him in the last 1.5 years. Randy possessed a sense of grace and decency that is uncommon in today's world, and I will always appreciate the fact that he enjoyed the basics in life. We would have as much fun going to Elmer's as he would be going to the top of the Rowan, because with Randy, every day was a laugh and an experience. He enjoyed life, and he loved his family deeply, and he will be missed.
My voice is weak today. And representing the family and the spirit of Randy, everything you said is very true. And he was always a person who always had a smile on his face and always found the good in everyone. Throughout his life since he was in high school, he was always active. It was one of his standards. Being active was almost as important as eating his dinner. But again, I want to thank the Planning Commission for this recognition from myself and from my whole family, and in the spirit of Randy and what he stood for his whole life. Thank you.
At this point, we're going to turn to public comment. This time has been set aside for members of the public to address the Planning Commission on consent calendar items and other agenda items and items of general interest within the subject matter jurisdiction of this commission. Please note that the Planning Commission is prohibited from taking action on items not listed on our posted agenda. There's 3 minutes allowed for each speaker. And if you are here on items 4A or 4B, because those are not public hearing items, this is the time that you would speak on either 4A or 4B. If you do wish to speak, if you would line up, please. Consent calendar items also. You'd state your name.
My name is Roland Lewis, and good afternoon and happy holidays. Excuse me for a moment. We share the north property line with the 1610 Hillview Cove homeowners pending landscape and solar issues. I'm concerned we're soon going on our 4th month and even into the new year with issues that could have been resolved a long time ago. Simply put, if everyone is willing to respect and uphold the laws of the state of California, we wouldn't be having any issues to deal with. Many of us have worked incredibly hard to guide this towards an amicable resolution. I commend the planning department on their vision in creating the 2 initial COAs, and the commission has made great efforts to fine-tune one portion of the COA to ensure smoother sailing ahead for the city and in turn everyone involved. I want to urge the commission to aggressively look at 2 issues holding this up. In the December 5th letter from the planning department, I was once again taken back to see some level of resistance in the 1610 homeowners' willingness to create a landscape array that falls into the designated and legal height limits of the COA. This has always been the problem. The last meeting was going well. The impressive concerns about height limits were shared by Madam Chair, and then for some reason, the chambers turned into what appeared to be the set of the game show Let's Make a Deal. Please keep in mind the same standards you're trying to apply to the center pertains to any area that will potentially have the ability to shade the solar panels for that maximum allowance of 10% between the hours of 10 and 2 p.m. These 3 23-foot palm trees that you okayed, and specifically the northwest corner, will likely be doing that the first autumn they are up. Please look at the shade study photos I gave you at the last month's meeting. They aren't just 23-foot trees. Being planted now, they are trees that are scientifically documented to grow to the height of 66 feet. These 3 northwest trees are 25 feet away from the solar shade array. The solar array. Above all, they are potentially illegal in regards to Section 25983 of the California Solar Shade Act. Please be very mindful of issuing a land use or permitting trees or shrubs that are not in compliance with the state laws. The city is not exempt from upholding these laws. Please consult the deputy attorney or city attorney about these issues. We don't want to see thousands of dollars worth of trees ripped out. I'm impressed that one of the first articles on Ms. Middleton in the Desert Sun was addressing her vision for solar in Palm Springs, going as far as requiring all new construction mandated to include solar. What's in front of us today couldn't be more timely. Thank you for your consideration. I would also like to share my condolences for the friends of Randy Lowe. He will be missed. His service to the city was commendable. Happy holidays, and thank you very much.
My name is John Deschmer, and see the El Rancho Vista Estates sign program. My comment is just to confirm that the El Rancho Vista Estates HOA agrees with the conditions recommended by the AAC. That's it.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Don Lawson, and I want to address item 4A. Is it appropriate to do that at this time?
Yes.
Okay. I live at 2696 North Girasol Avenue, which is right across the street from the proposed construction of this new home. I'm concerned about the setbacks. They've asked for an adjustment from a 25 to a 20-foot setback from the street on Girasol, and also I'm concerned about the fact that there's a 2-story dwelling on this property. There are no 2-story dwellings in our neighborhood. Now, we received a letter from the city saying that it was going to be something near 20 or 30 feet. We've met with the architect since then, and he said that it's going to be 12 feet. I'm not sure 12 feet from the top of the garage where the second story is going to be. But it supposedly is the same level as the main house, as the casitas on top of the garage is. But we have nothing in the neighborhood that is of that height if it's more than 12 feet. And those are some of the issues that I would like for the Planning Commission to consider for architectural requirements in our neighborhood. Also, it's a very modern house, and everything else in the neighborhood is more traditional, which is, I mean, I think the city is planning on going or has decided to go in the neighborhood of modern or mid-century modern from new architecture. But kind of stands out a little bit in our neighborhood, especially on that corner. So your consideration of either making sure that the height of this project does not exceed what the standard is for the city. We shouldn't have anything above 20 or 30, certainly 30 feet in that neighborhood, and we shouldn't have 2 stories. Thank you.
You.
Sorry for your loss. My name is Paul Levitan. I live at 785 Cabrillo. This is regarding item 4A. My property is the property adjacent to the planned new house there. My concern is the design of this property, the development, doesn't respect the site conditions as they presently exist now. I read the application for the modifications that are being requested from the commission, and I actually don't even, my biggest concern isn't even really addressed there, and that's that the elevation of the entire property is being filled in with landfill, elevating the, except for where there's a garage and a casita, the rest of it is being brought out to, from what I can tell, plat maps maybe about 10 feet above grade. Trust the commission to be able to interpret the codes. I tried reading the hillside codes, and I don't understand it. The only place that I was able to find discussion about landfill was actually under excavation. There's really not a particular discussion about landfill. Anyways, my concern is that the elevation of this pad puts not only the casita above the garage, but it puts the house up at that same level as the casita, which would essentially be a second-story house overlooking Girasol, so that as you're driving along, in my opinion at least, of the hillside codes, there's not continuity with the surrounding development. It's an old neighborhood, single-story houses, mostly all set back quite a bit from the street, and this would be a 2-story block, kind of urbanized in sort of a rural old neighborhood of Palm Springs. My house is easily over 70 years old. It's right behind there. I'm aware that it's a smaller lot, and some of the new infill lots, we've got maybe about half a dozen of them in the neighborhood, and I would like this development to be consistent with the other ones that are filled in there. They're all 1-story houses. I think some of them may have some setback modifications, I guess, but there's maybe about half a dozen new houses, and all of them are single-story. None of them have brought landfill in to elevate them above the street level, above the street grade. My main concern is that this house is crowding the neighborhood. And it's a big house on a small lot, and I think that we could easily fit a house on this lot. It's a gorgeous lot. It's a beautiful view, but maybe this house would be better on a larger lot where it can show itself off. Thank you.
Thank you.
Owner of the house that we've been talking about here. This is item 4A at 775 Cabrillo. I have to say, this is, being an architect and being my own house, this has been an extremely challenging lot to deal with. The minimum lot size in this area is 10,000 square feet. This lot is 9,148 square feet. It's 8.5% under the standard size of a lot. The minimum corner lot width to put a house on is 110 feet. This lot is 52.65 feet in the front. That's 53% under the standard for that width of a corner lot. The minimum lot depth in that zone, I'm talking about the R1C zone. The minimum lot depth is 100 feet. This lot is 66 feet. It's 34% substandard in that way. So this lot has been challenging in that it's smaller in every direction from the width that it should be, the depth that it should be, and the size that it should be, and it's on a slope. What happened with this lot is it was artificially scooped out to put the dirt in the lot behind, which my neighbor just spoke a second ago about. So it's not even where it should be. I'm following all the rules and guidelines and the zoning in the city to bring this lot to the pad level that is allowed in the code by averaging the front yard setback at the street. Because this is artificially low, it appears like I'm bringing a lot of dirt in, but what I'm doing is bringing the lot to where it once was before it was scooped out to make the lot behind. On that lot, I'm putting a 12-foot high structure. That's the maximum allowed by the code, but I think I have a creative solution to this lot dropping off rather than, as a developer might do, and come in and just fill the lot. I'm keeping the front of it at a slope so that the building can cantilever out, the main building, and where this casita is, it is 12 feet above the pad height, and I didn't fill in the bottom, and what it gave me was a basement underneath that I'm using as a garage. So from the back side of the casita facing the yard, it is 12 feet tall, and it does align with the house. The face of the garage and the casita is 20 feet from the street, but what happens in this particular location is the street dips. So I think this is a creative solution to fit a very challenging lot. As any good architecture does, it fits the lot, and this has been a challenging lot to fit, and I think this fits nicely on the lot. The house is also quite small. It's 1,900 square feet. It's made up of a one-bedroom, 1.5-bath house that's 1,400 feet.
If you'd start to wrap up, since you're the applicant, we may be asking you questions when this comes up.
And the casita is 400 square feet for a total of 1,900 feet. So I'd be happy to answer any questions later.
Thank you. Seeing no other people who wish to testify in public comment, I'm going to close public comment and move to the consent calendar. We have 4 items in the consent calendar, 1A, 1B, 1C, and 5A. Is there a motion or are there questions?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Can you call the roll, please?
Who made the second?
Commissioner Callardine?
I seconded it, I believe.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Calhoun. Voted.
These items pass 5-0. Moving to public hearings, the first public hearing is item 2A. Roysan versus, oh, I'm sorry, yes, we are doing 2C first. Avalon 1150 LLC, a request to reconsider a street name change from Avalon Way to Miralon Way at the Miralon development at 801 East Sunrise Parkway. Staff report, please.
Madam Chair, given that this street name change proposal will not result in any impact to property owners within the development, staff is asking the Planning Commission to make a recommendation of approval to the City Council for a final action. And that will conclude my staff report. Thank you. I'm available if you have any questions.
Are there any questions of staff? Seeing none, this is a public hearing. Do any members of the public wish to testify? Seeing none, I have a motion and by Commissioner Hirschbein and a second by Commissioner Callardine. Can you call the roll, please? This passes 5-0. Item 2A, Roysan v. LLC for a Planned Development District, a minor architectural application, a conditional use permit, a variance application proposing renovations and additions to an existing 62-room hotel to add an outdoor music venue, an outdoor restaurant use, an outdoor cocktail lounge, and support services at Monroe Hotel AKA Infusion Beach Hotel, located at 1900 North Palm Canyon Drive. Staff report, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You just about explained the whole project with the title. The project, as you have read in the staff report, is a series of modifications and additions to an existing 62-room hotel. The project, as you see it in this initial slide, and I'll run through the slides quickly and then get into some of the detail, is to basically energize or revitalize a rather old hotel with some outdoor live music activities. The image that you see on the screen is of the pool area. The area that you see in the center toward the background of this image is the DJ or sound stage, which has a retractable shade cover over it. The pool that is there has been installed with a recent renovation that the applicant was permitted by the city to do. So the swimming pool is now as you see it there. This is the context in which this project is sited. The project site is in the lower part of this aerial photo. To the very south in this particular image is Vista Chino, and as you see up toward the north end of this site is Via Escuela. Palm Canyon is at the left and Indian Canyon is at the right. I want to point out in this particular slide, also toward the upper part of this image, you can see the site that is the former Dink's restaurant at 2080 North Palm Canyon Drive. The parking lot for that particular site is proposed as the parking solution for the proposed additional uses that are being proposed at the 1900 address. This is another view, also giving you a bit of context. This is looking toward the east. Palm Canyon is in the foreground and Indian Canyon is in the upper part of this image. The property that you see to the right in this particular image is the Billy Reed's restaurant. And then there's another hotel, as you can see, on the left side to the north. Those who know Rick's Restaurant is the building in the lower part of this image. This is a computer rendering that gives a brief example of the various modifications that are proposed on this site. I'm going to step up to the screen and point these out very briefly to you so it's clear. Okay. So this is the existing hotel that is there right now. This is the existing parking lot for that hotel. This is a small proposed new building that would house a food service kitchen. This is a freestanding bar that would have bar services on both sides of this little building. This is the DJ stage or sound stage. And then here there's another bar. So there are basically two bars that will serve this outdoor pool and terrace area. And then this is a proposed new building that houses offices, security, ticketing, storage, and some locker rooms for staff. This area is a new proposed wall with landscaping and some other materials and textures that basically provides part of the acoustical and visual privacy to the site. Briefly on this slide, the existing conditions are at the left. The proposed new buildings are on the right in the dashed lines. There you see the restaurant building, the two bar buildings, the office and security building. And then there's some ADA spaces that are being integrated into the existing parking lot. Some large scale plans of those facilities. This is the kitchen building at the left, the bar area in the center, and the office security ticketing building to the right. These are rather small, and I don't think they're of much use to explain the project, but I have these in here for reference if we need to come back and talk about these. I will point out in the lower middle of this drawing are a series of what look like little squares Those are poolside cabanas that are proposed along the north side of the property. This is the 2080 North Palm Canyon Drive site, what we refer to as the Dinks building. Here you see the proposed valet stacking plan that the applicant has put in place as a proposed means of solving the parking requirements for this project. These are some details, again, I won't bother you with unless we need to come back and reference them. When this went through the AAC, they reviewed the project and asked that the applicant not only provide the improvements that you see on this particular slide for the frontage along Palm Canyon, but also to integrate new plant materials throughout the site where much of the existing material has either been lost or died over the 40 years or so that this building has been in place. I will point out that the landscaping that you see here on this drawing between the sidewalk and the proposed front of the building and the soundstage is essentially part of the public right-of-way. The new building sets back approximately a couple of feet from the property line, and as I'll explain to you later, it varies slightly in that dimension from the front property line, but it's basically pretty close to on the front property line with this new proposed building. Some details we'll get back into. This gives you a sense of the Palm Canyon frontage on the right side, 2 images, and then on the left are the existing conditions. On this front, let me stick back a minute over. On the lower right image here, you see what looks like some greenery on that front wall. That greenery is a vine type of material that's proposed on this material that's called Echo Mesh. And the intent is that this would be painted an accent color, as you see there in the lower right corner, kind of a terracotta red. And the plant material, which is a vine-like material, would eventually climb up and cover the wall by wrapping itself into this Echo Mesh. This is a rendering giving a sense of what the pool terrace area would look like as you look toward the hotel. Over on the right side of this image is the small building that's being proposed for the kitchen and food service. And then basically in the middle, a little bit hard to see behind the folded up umbrellas, is where the freestanding bar would be. And that's the same image that you see on the frontage. This is near the hotel building, near the hotel rooms, looking toward the freestanding bar, and in the far part of the image, you see the cabanas adjacent to the pool. This is the color schedule. Essentially, the building is being painted a neutral tone. The accent colors on the building will be the green that you see in the middle. The railings, which are a combination of existing wood and steel, will be painted what is called brown sugar. The block wall at the rooms and the baseboards, the cabanas, are the charcoal color in the lower left. And then, of course, the desert red we mentioned for the echo screen and the clay tile roofs. And the sidewalk gray is the color of the canopy over the DJ stage. Okay. I don't know what happened here. Okay, so when you look at the project before you, this is a series of applications. I'm going to try to take them from a more simpler part of the project through to the more complicated. The simpler part of this project is really the minor architectural application, which is proposing the landscape design and the buildings that we just spoke of. There's roughly 1,600 square feet of new buildings being proposed between the kitchen, the bar area, and the office ticketing and security building. The land that this project is on is split zoned, as is much of the Palm Canyon fronting property. That portion which fronts Palm Canyon is zoned C1. That portion that fronts Indian is R3. When you look at the overall development standards for the C1 zone, they are much more relaxed, and your front setback can be an average of 5 feet. Side yards do not require setbacks, and lot coverage can be 100%. However, because this is split zoned, the R3 portion of the lot does have more open space requirements, greater setbacks, and In the case of hotels, when you have a hotel that is in the C1 zone, the development standards of the R3 zone apply. So when you have a hotel type of building, which is what this one was originally built as only, the hotels are set back 30 feet from the front property line. And that's what the existing condition of this hotel is. So in looking at the project, part of what the PD is applied for is to seek relief from those development standards of the R3 zone as they apply to this project. The next part of this application comprises the conditional use permits. The proposed uses, which include the DJ sound stage, the outdoor cocktail lounge, the restaurant use in a hotel with less than 100 rooms, require conditional use permits. In the staff report, I provided the findings that you may choose to consider in adopting those conditional use permits for those proposed uses. The other two pieces of this application I'll talk about a little bit together. Part of the issue of this project, as I've identified in the first page of your staff report, is that the existing site cannot accommodate the proposed parking that would be required for these uses. So the remote parking that the applicant has proposed on the 2080 site, it would be required to be 100% valet parked. So visitors or patrons to this site for the sound venue, the cocktail lounge or restaurant, would arrive at the hotel. The valet staff would take the car, drive it up to the 2080 lot, and as the person is leaving this site, again, the valet would go to the 2080 site and retrieve the car and bring it back to this hotel site. The variance that's in this application is because the location of that remote parking lot at the 2080 lot is about 360 feet from the subject lot at 1900 where this hotel is located. The zoning code in the parking ordinance allows for remote parking, but it may not be greater than 300 feet from the site that requires the parking. So in this case, the remote parking is 360 feet roughly, and so we are seeking a variance approval to allow remote parking at a distance greater than what the zoning code otherwise permits. And lastly, the PD. The Planned Development District in this particular case is being used as a tool to request the relief from some of the development standards for hotel uses in the C1 zone. So it's requesting setbacks in front and side yard setbacks. It's also requesting relief from distance between buildings. The zoning code requires distance between buildings to be a minimum of 15 feet when they're substantially parallel to one another. In this case, they would be reduced to approximately 5 to 6 feet between the building and the kitchen and the building and the existing hotel building, I'm sorry, and the proposed office building. The other aspects that the Planned Development District is seeking relief on is open space. For hotels in the R3 zone, the code requires a minimum of 45% usable open space. That means it could be landscaping, recreational areas, terraces, pools, and so on. This hotel, as it exists today, does not meet that minimum requirement for open space. There is about 41% open space when you calculate it on the existing hotel as it sits there today. I believe that the reason that that percentage of open space is less is I believe that this particular hotel, which was built in the early 80s, was probably built at a time before that particular performance standard was imposed into the ordinances. With this proposed project, the open space would be reduced from approximately 41% to about 38%. And I'll get into that a little bit further when we talk about the findings on the PD. And lastly, and perhaps one of the more significant aspects of the development standards for which we're seeking relief is parking. The applicant has included in their materials a parking study and a traffic study. In the parking study, the applicant is asserting that because of the location of this project, in an area where there are a number of other hotels and residential uses, that a number of people that will likely come to use the cocktail lounge use, the restaurant use, and to come for the entertainment uses would probably come from many of those adjacent hotels. Also, it's expected that many of the people that are staying at this hotel would also be the same people that would be using these outdoor entertainment spaces. So the applicant is basically asserting that there are a number of various factors that would argue that the off-street parking requirement that the code requires is not necessary. And they're proposing through the parking study that 50% of the required parking be provided. And that 50% of the parking that would be provided, which is about 60 spaces, would be located on that 2080 lot that I spoke about earlier. On page 6 of your staff report are the hours of proposed uses for the various areas in this project. So we have restaurant uses, the pool area, bar service, and music. For the analysis of this project, it did require evaluation under CEQA. An initial study was prepared evaluating the potential impacts of the project, and a 20-day public comment period was initiated. As part of the CEQA analysis, there was also, in addition to the parking study, a noise analysis, an acoustical study. That acoustical study revealed that there would be potential sound or noise impacts from the outdoor amplified music that would be part of the outdoor DJ booth activity. And the mitigation measures have put in place some technical requirements for the sound system that the acoustical analysis and the acoustical consultant have recommended in order to reduce the noise levels from these proposed uses to within the range that the city's noise ordinance allows. So in essence, what I'm saying is, with the mitigation measures and the integration of the technical requirements therein, the consultant believes that the noise levels that would be generated from this outdoor amplified music use would be reduced to a level that does conform to the city's noise ordinance. I beg your pardon, just while I get a little bit of review in here so I make sure I covered everything for you. On page 12 of your very long staff report is the analysis on parking. And as you can see there, if you combine the existing 62-room hotel with the proposed new uses, the total required off-street parking spaces for this project would be 221. The applicant is proposing a total of 140 spaces, or a deficiency of about 81. There's an existing 59 spaces on the site, and the additional 81 spaces would be proposed as a valet park system at the 2080 lot. At the bottom of this particular chart on page 12 is a brief section there on accessible parking. When you look at the parking code, it requires that when you do have up to 300 spaces, 7 accessible spaces are required. There are 3 accessible spaces on the lot right now. 4 can be accommodated without loss of parking in that existing lot, and that is what we would be proposing to satisfy the accessible parking requirements of the code. In terms of the PD, as you know, the City Council adopted in 2008 a policy requiring that projects that propose a PD and that are seeking relief from development standards provide some type of public benefit that's proportionate to the degree of relief that the applicant is seeking. In this case, the applicant is proposing the project itself as the public benefit. That is, revitalization of an older hotel, adding entertainment uses that would be such that they would further invigorate and revitalize the northern part of the city. Staff believes when you look at the various reductions in setbacks and so on, they are moderate in their degree of relief that they're being sought. we believe that the request for the 50% reduction in required parking is considerable. And that's something that the Planning Commission is going to probably want to look at with some degree of care on this particular project. As you go into the latter parts of the staff report, you will find the findings evaluating the project against the guidelines of architectural review in Zoning Code Section 9404, the findings for the Planned Development District of 9403, the findings for the conditional use permits from 9402, sorry, and the variance findings, which start on the beginning of page 19 and continue on to page 20. As I did mention on the last part of your staff report, there was an environmental analysis done on this project. The mitigation measures involving the noise are identified on pages 23 and 24. In terms of the issue of potential traffic and parking impacts, you will see that in the conditions of approval, there are a series of requirements or conditions that are also a mitigation measure that require a long-term lease, that require the valet parking, that require, and I'm going to have to reference this so I can accurately call this for you. I'm sorry, bear with me just a moment. Sorry. It would also require limiting the capacity of a future restaurant use at the 2080 North Palm Canyon Drive building. And I would call to your attention some clarification in the staff report in one of the footnotes. When the Dinks building was processed in its entitlements, the parking this is on the bottom of page 13, the parking requirements for the Dinks building was based on 2,373 square feet of area where the public is served. As you know, with restaurants, you can either calculate parking based on one parking space for every 3 seats, or you can calculate it based on one space for every 35 square feet where the public is served. The Dinks building, when it was entitled with a requirement for 69 off-street parking spaces. With this proposal, where valet parking is the total required method of parking on that lot, there is enough parking for the future use of the restaurant with those restrictions that I just stated, and 50% of the parking for the entertainment uses that are proposed on this site, okay? And if I need to further clarify that for you, I certainly am happy to do so. That concludes my staff report. We are recommending approval of this project. You will find in your conditions of approval the issues that I've addressed regarding the parking for the long-term lease. In your packets, you will see a copy of a 10-year lease that the applicant has executed with the property owner. And I wanted to also speak to a question that came up earlier before the meeting, and I'm going to pass this out briefly. The question was, what have we done on past projects where there has been a, let me just take one of these, where there has been some type of an outdoor amplified music or outdoor venue. The conditions that are excerpted there on the 2 pages that are being passed out to you are from the conditions of approval for the 750 Lofts project, which of course has not gone forward, and the conditions of approval that were imposed on the Belardo Hotel project, which is down near where the Hacienda used to be. We are sensitive to the fact that this has a very similar characteristic to the Hacienda Cantina project, which the city received considerable numbers of noise complaints. And it was because of that project that we required the applicant to go through a much more thorough analysis of the potential noise impacts for the project, and that is why you're seeing those mitigation measures that are there. That concludes my report. We are recommending approval of the project with conditions. Because part of this application is a planned development district, Part of what your actions could be today, should you choose to approve the project, is to also recommend approval of the PD by the City Council. And if you choose to adopt this project, or if you choose to approve this project, I would point out in the recommendations for approval that you would be adopting the CEQA analysis and the proposed mitigated negative deck as an adequate environmental analysis of the project under CEQA. That concludes my staff report. The applicant is in the audience if you have further questions, and they will be providing a presentation on it as well, and we're available to answer any questions you
Ken,
have.
thank you for an exhaustive report. I believe it will, I'm going to make a motion that we send this to a study session before we take this up. And I'm not sure if I can make that now. I know that we will have, the suggestion is that we take public testimony since people have come here, but that we continue this so that we won't, at this point, ask questions of staff or deliberate after public testimony. I don't know if there's a second on the commission. We have a second, third, and fourth. Is it appropriate to call the roll at this point on the continuance and then just open it for public testimony?
If you would defer your action on that continuance until you take public testimony.
Fine. At this point, though, I didn't want to have questions of staff. I think we have exhaustive numbers of questions that it would be helpful to have a study session before, so that we can organize our questions in a better fashion. No.
The public hearing still be open when we came back?
Yes. Yes, I think that's the appropriate way that we
So people
generally
would have
handle this.
another option for testifying.
Right, and we've also received a fairly lengthy request letter from the neighborhood, and I think we want to, with the number of issues here, the entire commission would like some time to spend on this. So with that, I'm going to open public comment. The applicant has 10 minutes to speak. You'll have 3 minutes for rebuttal. And then I'd ask members of the public who wish to speak if you would, and if you decide not to, when it comes back, you'll have a chance to speak. Terry, can you set the 10 minutes?
So, well, I actually just have a question. Would I be, after study session, would I still, as the applicant, be making a presentation after study session?
Yes.
Okay, so then I would defer to after the study session, I believe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any members of the public that wish to speak?
My name is Jim Hollenbeck. I'm a homeowner of 5 years at 2065 Tangerine Court. We are the closest residential development to the proposed project. I can tell you that we're looking forward to its development. Our area has been a bit blighted by a lot of empty businesses. Dink's has been empty for quite some time. There's a restaurant next door to the project that's been empty that used to be a barbecue. There's a Irish pub that's been empty for some time, and there are a couple of nearby inns and hotels that are empty. So as a neighbor, I really would like to see this move forward. I'd also like to say that I've known Chris Rosis and the Infusion brand for 10 years. In fact, I encouraged them to come into the neighborhood after I bought a home, which is only a few hundred feet from the proposed project. They've been great in supporting the community, in public events, nonprofit organizations, and I would just like to be on record as saying I'd like to see this move forward. One last comment I'd like to make. I'm a little emotional because Randy Lowe is a friend of mine for 20 years. I know how much he appreciated his work on this commission. He was a great mentor and friend of mine, and he will be missed. Thank you.
If there's no one else that wishes to speak, I'll close the public hearing.
Madam Chair, might I recommend that we go ahead and select a date for the study session? What I would propose to you is that we have the study session on the January 10th meeting. That's the next available date that we have for a study session. Just so members of the public and the applicant is aware, we would hold the study session on January the 10th.
And starting at 10:30, so we give ourselves time.
Exactly. The study session is not a public hearing, but it does, we have public comment available during that, and during study sessions, we also allow the applicant to give an extensive presentation and to answer any questions that the Planning Commission may have regarding the project.
That being said, I'll entertain a motion to, let me make the motion. This is to continue this item to a date uncertain, but to a study session on January 10th at 10:30.
What I would request is that we continue this to a date certain, so that way the public comment remains open, and then also we do not need to do the additional public hearing notices for that.
Do you think it should, do you want to do it on the same date? Or the 20, either.
Okay, so let's go ahead and, on January the 10th, we'll go ahead and continue this to a date certain with a study session at 10:30 on January the 10th.
So the motion has been made and seconded. If you call the roll, please. This passes 5-0. Thank you. At this point, I've had a request for a 5-minute break until 10:03, and then just for members of the public and the commission, we need to vacate this space at 4:30 so that they can prepare for city council meeting.
We would not necessarily take it up that afternoon.
Meeting of the Planning Commission back to order. Before us is item 2B, J.R. Haverdale LLC for tentative map 37376 to subdivide 2.67 acres of land into 4 parcels for the existing commercial development located at 450, 462, 490, South Palm Canyon Drive and 471 South Indian Canyon Drive. The recommendation of staff is to continue the public hearing to a regularly scheduled meeting on January 10th, 2018. I take a motion to that effect.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Just for clarification, can I ask why we're doing that? Why wound up on this and then we're moving it?
Staff will have to answer that question.
Yes, on this particular item, there was a problem with the public hearing notice, so it needs to be renoticed.
Okay.
So we have a motion and a motion by Commissioner Donenfeld, a second by Commissioner Callardine or Commissioner Hudson. And can you call the roll, please? This passes 5-0, and it is continued until January 10, 2018. Item 3A, which is unfinished business and was not a public hearing item, Legacy Palm Springs LLC, owner for a major architectural application proposing a development of a 114-bed assisted living facility with accessory commercial uses on a 1.43 acre lot located at 1000 North Palm Canyon Drive. We have a recommendation to continue this to January 10th, 2018. Can I have a motion to that effect? Moved by Commissioner Callardine, seconded by Commissioner Hirschbein. Can you call the roll, please? This passes 5-0, and this will be continued until January 10th, 2018. The next item is item 4B, Gastadora. I'm not sure. We exchanged that when we did the agenda. Gastadora LLC for a major architectural application to construct a planned industrial business park consisting of 4 buildings totaling 35,496 square feet on 1.77 acres of vacant land located on the east side of Rupert Street between 19th and 20th Avenues. Staff report, please.
Chairwoman Wermuck and Planning Commissioners, the request before you is a major architectural application to construct 4 buildings across 5 existing properties within the industrial subdivision located in the northwest area of the city, northwest of the freeway and Indian Canyon Drive. The total acreage for the site is 1.77 acres. And the buildings range in size from just under 6,000 square feet to roughly 16,000 square feet for the largest size building. So what you have on the screen here is an overall view of where the project is located within the subdivision and relative to the freeway. It's along Rupert Street on the east side of the street, north of 20th Avenue and Orr Way, and south of 19th Avenue. This is a picture showing the site plan imposed on the aerial and the layout of the buildings as they are proposed over the 1.77 acre site. There will be 3 access driveways. One of those exists on the southerly border of the project site, and then 2 will be located near the center of the site to provide access to the other 3 buildings. This image shows each of the lots 32 through 36, and the proposed buildings located on those lots. Lot 32 and 34 there will be one building, and that is the two-story building for the project. All other buildings are one-story. So to start with Lot 32, you have a 6,126 square foot building. There will be parking adjacent to that with the access driveway that will be shared between the two properties of 32 and 34. The two-story building will be 16,152 square feet and span the two properties, lots 33 and 34. There is terrain variation over the entire 550-foot wide site of about 12 feet, roughly a 2% slope from the high point on the north side of the site to the very southerly side of the site. So there is some terrain variation, and you do see some differentiation in the pad elevations. So 55 for the higher portion and 50.6 for the lower portion for the finished floors. Lot 35 is a 5,797 square foot one-story building, and parking will be adjacent to the building between the building and the street. And lastly, Lot 36 is 7,421 square feet in size, and is again at the southerly end of the site, and will share an access driveway with the existing the existing property to the south that is currently developed. The planting palette proposes a mix of desert-appropriate trees and plants. One thing that the AAC recommended when they reviewed this back in November was an increase in the average height of the palms. Previously, they were proposed at 8 to 12 feet in height. They're now proposing a 12 to 14 foot high California fan palm for the plants, for the trees in the project. The planting, the shrubs and desert accents are all appropriate for the desert environment, and our selections from the Coachella Valley Water District's Lush and Efficient book, so they are appropriate for this desert climate. For the project, the buildings are being built as shell buildings, so the applicant has provided a tabulation of what is potential for the site in terms of office area, warehouse, and manufacturing uses. So the total parking provided is in compliance with the zoning code. However, the project is conditioned such that once the uses do start to occupy the buildings, they do have to demonstrate conformance to the zoning code prior to either issuance of building permit for tenant improvements or a business license. So we are able to monitor that and make sure that the parking does comply with current zoning code requirements based on those uses as they start occupying the tenant spaces. So that's kind of an overall view or an overall summary of the project. Staff, as I noted, presented the project to the AAC back in November. They did recommend approval with 3 conditions. One of those was that the applicant work with staff on making some adjustments to the building design, the glazing, the corner elements, and the taller palm trees. The applicant has made some changes to the plans, and what you have before you are those changes. The most probably noticeable change is the building corner elements, the corner tower elements. Those extend from the building face about 2 feet to give some variation in the building articulation, as well as recessing the windows about 4 feet from those building forms. So those adjustments have been made in the plans, and the plans that you have before you, as well as the taller palm trees. There is 2 of the buildings, lots 32 and 36, as you see in the rendering here, have a greenhouse roof element on top. The AAC recommended that come back to them for review should that go forward in the future if cannabis-related uses are proposed in the building. So that would be an item that would return and is part of the conditions before you. Lastly, the AAC recommended changes to the building colors. I have the color material board on the board behind you here. So that does show the colors that were presented. The AAC had some comments about the color, the lighter primary tan that's being used on the buildings as being too pink, and felt it would be more appropriate to be less pink and more muted in terms of its color. So those would come back to a subcommittee for review, an AAC subcommittee for review prior to the final selection. So those are part of the conditions that are before you. Staff has prepared findings in support of the application and a draft resolution for your consideration. The project is exempt pursuant to Section 15332 of the California Environmental Quality Act, and has presented analysis in your staff report to justify that recommendation. So that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. The applicant is also here to answer questions. Thank you.
Staff or for the applicant? So I'm seeing three. Lynn, why don't you go forward?
Okay, noticing the parking analysis that on a couple of the buildings, you note that 10 spaces are required, but only 9 are provided, yet we say that the parking is met. Is it shared parking between the various buildings?
So they're presenting it as shared parking. So yes, that is correct.
So, okay, the deficiency of one space would be met by the other building spaces, excess ones. I note on the plans, an odd item, the driveways appear to go all the way to almost penetrate into the next adjacent lots on the street on the lots to the east. Is there any plan for extending those, or does that happen to be the way they just drew it up, is to take that driveway to the...
To answer that, and I'll let the applicant correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that when this, back in the early 90s and perhaps the late 80s, when this subdivision was first approved, they required reciprocal access easements over the side property lines. So that's why those are situated where they're at.
Okay. The adjacent lots are not developed though, right?
The only lots that are developed are the lot to the rear of Lot 32, which is Lloyd's Pest Control, and the lot to the south of Lot 36.
Okay. I guess you sort of indicated that it would be possible for these buildings to be used for cannabis-related uses that would require more permitting. Could you kind of expand on that?
Correct. So based on the current ordinance, depending on the type of cannabis business, it could require a conditional use permit or not. It really comes down to the type of cannabis-related business.
And I might just add, I want to make it clear that we are not considering the use here today. We are looking at the site plan and conformance to the city's development standards. So the discussion should be based on the development standards.
I understand. I'm just sort of thinking ahead a little bit here. Because we've got the thing that piqued my interest is the greenhouse on the top of the buildings. I don't know what that would be for, but I suspect it's not growing palm trees.
And you're correct. And one of the conditions from the AAC was that any greenhouse element would come back for further review.
We don't, those two buildings don't look like they show a second-story access in their plan. We know where the other building does. So I don't know if we need to on any of that, or...
Well, we would evaluate that with the application that was presented when the cannabis business was brought forward.
We're not approving the greenhouse at all at this point. Okay, that's my questions.
Commissioner Donenfeld.
I have one question. When I looked at the plan palette, excuse me, looked at the plan palette for the site, there were a lot of shade-type trees that were listed. When I look at the rendering of the site, all I see are very tall palm trees in the parking lot, and I was wondering, first of all, where would we find those more shade-bearing trees, and shouldn't we want to see some of those in the parking lot? Because there's actually, from what I can tell in the rendering of the site, there are no trees other than the high palm trees.
Yeah, to respond to that, the renderings do not reflect the proposed landscape accurately. So the landscape plan that is presented, sheets L1 through L5, show the shade trees adjacent to the parking spaces and landscape fingers as required by our code in terms of parking lot shading. So the project does comply with that. You see there is a small table on the bottom left of sheet L1 that does show where the project does comply with the minimum parking lot shading for commercial businesses.
I'm looking at L1. I do see where there's more planting indication here. Thank you.
Commissioner Hudson.
Yeah, thank you. David, I'm still a bit confused by the site planning aspects of this, specifically the back of the buildings, the back of the project. Two of the buildings are directly on the property line, if I'm reading this correctly, and two buildings are held away. My question is pertaining to the two buildings that are held away. Is that pavement behind those two buildings? Is there a perimeter fencing or a wall planned for this project? It just seems that the back just sort of peters out. There's a couple driveways, but there's no edge of pavement shown. Because my concern, if it just sort of backs up to bare desert right now, it's either for security or for general maintenance or even for the fire department. I'm just very curious as to how that works.
Let's see, so you are correct. There isn't anything indicated on the plans as to how that transition would occur, if it's going to be a wall or a curb or just the end of the pavement. It does appear on the site plan P1 and P2 and P3 that that it does appear as that may be part of some access easement.
I was looking at P1 and I still couldn't figure it out, but I don't know whether, I think it just needs to be clarified. Just sort of see different things on different drawings, and I guess if this is the applicant, maybe, David.
Yeah, I'd defer the applicant on that one.
Are there other questions for the applicant before we ask this? Because then we'll combine questions. This may be the only one, if you'd introduce yourself. Oh, sorry.
There we go. Good afternoon. My name is Alan Levine. I'm here with Gabe Lujan. Gabe is the architect on the site. I am the engineer on the site. And the reason for those areas in the back, similar to the question as to why the driveways extend, when the tract was originally approved, there were conditions that required reciprocal access. So half of that will be to the properties adjacent to the east. When those develop, they would need to provide the other half of the access through there. So we can't really put a wall there. It kind of precludes the ability to have access.
Are you paving then your half in the interim?
At this time, yes.
Have you met with the fire department? Is there a fire truck access necessary behind the two northern buildings?
Gabriel Lujan. At this point, we haven't met with the fire. We did see their conditions of approval, and we did see about the 25-foot radius. So at that point, we will meet with fire. Those are just easements, and we don't know why they're there. They don't make sense. But unfortunately, it got approved, and we're trying to work around them. For us to abandon them, we'd have to go through the whole process of getting them abandoned.
Thank you.
Just following up on that with City Engineering Department, is there anything that we need to do with this in terms of the back of the property and conditions?
Not from the engineering department, no.
And is there anything that you want to create as a condition?
Again, my concern is basically the fire access. If the fire department needs access in back of those buildings, I would assume the full width of the driveway needs to be built at this time. I'm just not sure technically how that happens. And I think the turning radius for the fire truck really needs to be looked at as well. So sort of a chicken and egg thing, but I just thought I'd bring that up because it could be a major issue affecting the building placement.
Lynn, do you have comments on this?
What we will do is we will work with engineering. This will be part of the aspect when we get into the permits for the project, that we will verify that with the fire as we review those through the permitting process. What we might do, if you'd feel more comfortable, we can just add a condition of approval that addresses that, to have staff verify those driveways in those locations and the development of those areas prior to the issuance of a building permit.
So at this point, do I have a motion on this? Do we need discussion? We have a motion.
Move staff recommendation.
Yep.
Just one comment, and again, it's sort of a technicality. I was looking at the section drawings through the various buildings.
Yes.
And you're showing rooftop mechanical.
Yes.
I just want to, it's sort of a pet peeve of mine, but we always end up with projects where, you know, the mechanical pads get put in and then the unit changes specification, and we still end up seeing mechanical equipment on the roof. I just want to have as a condition that no matter what AC units you put up on the roof, the parapets have to shield them. That is a city requirement, but so often, you know, during construction, it's not enforced.
And we're currently working on that. We got several projects we're working in the city of Cathedral City, where we're doing the cannabis cultivation, and we found some low profile AC units or package units. So we are implementing them into all of our cultivation projects now.
We have a motion and a second at this point. Comments? And the motion would include resolving the issue with the driveway in the back, and also requirement that the parapets, when mechanicals get put on the roof, the parapets actually obscure the mechanicals.
And Madam Chair, what I would recommend is relative to the mechanical equipment, we'll modify condition PLN 7 accordingly, that the parapet shall be taller than the height of the rooftop equipment.
And at this point, we can control the roof height, so the building does not go any higher. We can always control our interior elevation or interior heights.
Okay, at this point, we have a motion and a second with two conditions and discussion.
Yeah, just quickly, is there any solar application in these buildings?
No, at this point, we don't have solar. If and when this project is used for medical cannabis, we've realized that solar does not even tickle the need. That's why we designed it with a greenhouse effect, so that we can have more of a greenhouse. We can still satisfy the alternative energy code. So that's why we designed it originally, to be able to provide the greenhouses. But at this point, there is no solar if it does become cannabis.
Are you adding a condition?
I'd like to see some amount of, they're big roofs, they're not all going to be greenhouses.
So.
Yeah, I'd like to. I don't know how to, not sure how to word it, though. Certain
Glenn?
percentage.
A little tough without any type of a target to aim towards. Just having a generic requirement that solar shall be provided doesn't really get you where you want to be.
What if we require that solar provide 50% of the electrical requirements of the buildings, and take into consideration that that requirement may dip if they're greenhouses?
You've heard testimony that cannabis use
will
not meet that requirement.
Can we take the electrical usage of a potential cannabis facility out of that equation?
Potentially. What you might be able to say is that it provides 50% of the building's need exclusive of cannabis-related uses.
We could.
Right.
Yeah,
thank you. I would like
that would work.
Is that motion acceptable to you? And it's acceptable to me as the second. Can you call the, is there any more discussion?
Would you just clarify for me what we're voting on with respect to the solar requirement?
So the solar requirement would be that the applicant is required to provide solar in the amount of 50% of the building's electrical needs, excluding cannabis-related uses.
Thank you.
And there's been a request to clarify that 50% of the building's need, excluding cultivation, cannabis cultivation needs.
It's fine with me. Just a comment before we vote. I sat in on a presentation on light bulbs that are new, that essentially mirror sunlight and are being used, are just being developed for cannabis use. I'd be glad to, I don't have the information with me, but would be glad to get it to Flynn. It might be helpful to you if you end up doing this.
Okay. We're always looking for alternative energy measures. One of the other ones is gas, but unfortunately gas is too far from our project still. So at this point, we've explored solar. We've explored solar tube skylights. We've explored the greenhouse. That's why we decided to put the greenhouse, just in case that would work. So we're always open for.
It's something that I've recently had presented at a sort of a salon, and it was very interesting. But I'll get the information, send it to Flynn.
Okay.
I'm not promoting it. I just thought it might be useful.
That's fine.
So if you'd call the roll, please. Your project's approved, 5-0. Good luck to you.
Thank you very much.
Invite us to the opening.
We will. We will.
What? No, we don't get. We get nothing except an invitation, maybe. Okay, item 4A for the people who've waited to the bitter end. James Schmidt, owner, for a major architectural application for the construction of a 1,952 square foot house and a request for an administrative minor modification for the alterations of setback, building height, and building separation on a hillside lot located at 775 Cabrillo Road. Staff report, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application to construct a house on an oddly shaped, non-conforming legal lot. The proposed house will be 9,148 square feet with a casita that would equal 956 square feet with a garage underneath. So the application, looking at the site plan that is before you on the slide, is requesting an administrative minor modification to reduce setbacks. The application would reduce the setbacks along Cabrillo and Girasol from 25 feet to 20 feet. The applicant is also looking at reducing the distance between buildings between the casita and the main house from 15 feet to 12 feet, and also increasing a building height from 12 feet at the setback line to 20 feet at the setback line. The administrative minor modification process allows this to occur if approved by the Planning Commission. So I'm going to go through some slides. As mentioned, this slide also includes the landscape plan, which shows minimal landscaping, desert scape along Cabrillo Road and along Girasol. It shows the proposed contour lines also on the lot. There is a floor plan that is included in your package. As I mentioned, the casita includes the main house with the casita at the same level and the garage underneath. This is a roof plan showing solar on the roof. In this slide, it shows building sections. So the top section shows the house that's located to the west and how that house will sit higher than the proposed new structure. And then the middle building section also includes the house to the west, and then the pool with the casita and garage. And then that section CC on the bottom is looking at it a different direction. This is looking from Girasol with the house to the south, and you'll see that the casita and the house are at one level, and that it is almost consistent with the level of the house to the south with the garage below. These are building elevations. The house is a modern design. It'll be clad in Core-10 steel with glazing and aluminum siding or aluminum frame system for the glass. There is a formed concrete base that the house will cantilever over at the corner of the lot. This is a slide of the proposed casita. As you can see, the garage sits tucked underneath this, the casita, which sits on top. The floor plates are 8 feet for the casita and then 13 feet or 12 feet for the casita on top. 8 feet for the garage, and the casita sits on top. So the maximum height from the bottom of the garage to the top of the casita is 20 feet. However, when you're within on the pad site where the main house is, it is 12 feet. So the design architect has done some renderings as to how this house would look. You'll see that there's landscaping added to the front with the garage tucked underneath the casita. This is another design from looking from the corner of the house. And then these are other renderings from within the pool courtyard and from the street. There is a material board that is placed up on the dais up there for you to look at. There was a question earlier about if there's guest parking. The driveway, I know it's hard to see, but there's a shaded hatch section that will provide off-street parking adjacent to the garage doors. So in your staff report, it discusses how height is measured on a hillside lot. So how we measure height is we take points along the street, along Cabrillo Road, which is the front of the parcel, and find a natural grade or point to start measuring the pad. So when this house was, when the pad was established, it was determined that there would be a 12-foot maximum height of the house, and that is how we measured for the maximum height of the casita being 20 feet. So there's a natural dip along Girasol that is somewhat viewable in this topography. So the lowest point of the lot is the corner, the southwestern corner of the lot where the garage is entered. So in your staff report, there are findings for the major architectural and for the administrative minor modification. We did include some additional pictures of houses that are within the neighborhood that do have these types of conditions where a garage is tucked underneath a portion of the house. So that was requested by some of the commission members to see if this condition is present in the neighborhood. Within the immediate blocks of this house, they're mainly one story, but in other parts of Little Tuscany, there are, where there's hillside conditions, there are garages tucked underneath other structures. So that concludes my report, Chair, and the applicant is here to answer any questions.
With questions of staff, starting with Commissioner Callardine and then working down to Commissioner
I'm still confused a little bit about the street improvements versus the conditions. The staff report seems to say that there will be no improvements to Girasol and Cabrillo, that you would leave the existing edge of pavement where it is, but the conditions in the back from engineering seem to state that the roadway would be improved to 18 feet from the center line on both streets with the pavement only the sidewalk would be deferred. I'd like to get clarification of what's proposed, in particular since that does relate to the way we justify, or you're justifying the 20-foot versus 25-foot setback.
The conditions do request that the ultimate, or the roadway be widened to the width of the adjacent segments. So yeah, that is a condition that engineering has been put on.
That conflicts with the staff report, right? Or
Right, the applicant is asking for deferment of that condition. Hasn't been granted, but they're asking for it.
okay, so you wrote it on the basis that it would be deferred.
Yes.
Okay.
Is that open to us to decide that, or is that to staff to decide?
We can certainly make a recommendation as to whether we think that the street should be improved or not. The two-story versus one-story, how far away are these two-story units? Are they further up the hill on off Racket Club, like in Milo and streets like that?
Not as high up in Milo. They're more on Vista.
Are any of them west of, north, I guess it would be north of Racket Club?
They're south of Racket Club, but on the north sides of the street.
I'm looking more at the immediate neighborhood. I don't see any, I drove out there, I didn't see any two-story sections.
And the pictures that were passed out, there's one at 2585 Girasol, which, sits higher up on the hill.
Right. Now, where is that with respect to Racket Club?
That is to the north of Racket Club.
On the same side?
So it's on the same side as the subject lot.
The rest of these are?
On the south side of Racket Club, farther up the hill.
So we have one example where there's a two-story garage tucked under in the more immediate neighborhood.
Correct.
Did we look at all, the setback from the backyard on this, which would be to the adjacent property to the south, right? Or, I know we're at a strange angle here, so what's south? We've got the kind of green. Did we look at in going into that setback at all, since that's the adjacent property's side yard, and would that give us more flexibility with the lot if we did?
So this lot has a front on Cabrillo, so the rear yard setback is the southern lot line. So
right.
So it's 15. The applicant did not request a reduction of that setback.
I'm just wondering, rather than doing some of these things that would affect the view from the street, would it be more efficient use of the lot if we impinged into the adjacent, the backyard setback? In particular, because that's not his backyard, that's his side yard. It's just a thought as an idea that might be considered.
Right, you could reduce it to 12 and a half with the AMM.
No, this area here. Backyard, and it was his neighbor's side yard. That's all I have at the moment.
Several years ago, when I was on Planning Commission before, we wrestled with and amended the hillside ordinance, and it is always perplexing to people to figure this out. But one of the reasons we increased building height allowance for hillside to 30 feet is because very often you have very steep slopes, and you can build a house that sort of climbs the natural slope of the site to 30 feet because of the way the hillside is configured. It's not obtrusive. It just goes in keeping with the topography. Here we don't quite have that. We've got not a terribly significant slope, and a 20-foot house does sort of stick out on that lot. So I understand where the neighbors are coming from, because it doesn't really fit the typical hillside where you can feel comfortable allowing a height increase of that significance. So I'm a little concerned about the 20 feet. How does planning feel about that? And am I not correct that the reason for the increased height is because very often you've got a topography where it can take it because you don't have a big enough pad, you can start building up a little bit and follow the slope.
Well, the hillside ordinance is allowed to provide flexibility. We've seen it used in certain locations. So granted, this, it is a corner lot, it's a visible location, and originally staff had requested that the setback be kept at 25. It went to AAC, and AAC liked the design, and we're recommending approval of it.
Well, I can't give opinions now. I'll wait to give my opinions later, but I'm not quite sure this height is appropriate for this site. That's my question, whether the hillside ordinance really should allow this kind of an increase.
Are there any other questions for staff? Are there any questions for the applicant? Okay, let's let it go to comments. Shall we start at your end?
Okay.
You might as well go first.
First of all, I'll just say that I find this house really, really interesting. It's a difficult site. I've driven around that neighborhood often and actually looked at this lot and sort of, almost wondered to myself, what could be done there? It's an interesting neighborhood. It's very eclectic. Some of the lots are sort of trapezoidal shapes, and this lot sort of intrigued me because it has a corner sort of cut out to it with a staircase up to the upper neighbor's parcel. So there's just a whole handful of different challenges going on. I'd like to use for reference in my comments sheet number 6, which I think is pretty useful in terms of describing potential concerns about height. The upper section AA, I think, very clearly shows that the horizontal quality of this house. I think most importantly, it shows that even the roof of this thing is below, the uphill neighbors, the neighbor to the west. So there's no view implication for the uphill neighbor, which is always, always the problem in hillside neighborhoods. Likewise, the bottom section CC, sort of, looking at the house basically towards the west. And it shows the neighbor's house to the south. And yes, the neighbor's house is a little bit lower and obviously of a different style. But to sort of cut to the chase, aesthetically, I think this house, the Corten steel, the very minimal quality of it, the fact that the Corten masses sort of float on top of concrete bases or plinths is a wonderful way to treat a hillside house. A block away, there's a Lance O'Donnell house. There's a project by Sean Lockyer not too far away. So there's a lot of really interesting houses being built in this neighborhood. In terms of the 20-foot height, it basically occurs at the garage, and that's of course the highest portion. But the applicant made a statement earlier, and I agree with this. By tucking the garage underneath the casita, you're sort of eliminating, another bulk, another use on the site plan. The house is a very reasonable size. There's a lot of open space on the house, on the lot rather, visually and technically. So if it comes down to the height, I am really comfortable and have no qualms in saying that 20-foot height of the garage and the casita does not bother me. With boulders, landscaping, I have a feeling that portion may be much, much softer and more sheltered than what is apparent in some of these very minimalist images. In terms of the potential street improvements, I think one of the charms of that neighborhood are these fairly narrow streets. that sort of wind around and up the hill. So I would be opposed to requiring the street improvements, the widening of the two streets. I think it just sort of takes away from the character. So those are my comments.
I would like to thank my fellow Commissioner Hudson for his comments, because those are going to be exactly mine as well. So I'm just going to agree with everything he said, because he said it a lot better than I could.
I'm a little bit in a dilemma on this because I think it's a terrific design. And I know how difficult a lot this is to design for. So I compliment the architect and the applicant on that. I don't think this really fits a hillside expansion of height, given the nature of this site, but in light of the fact that it's not terribly high and is well placed on the site, and as Mr. Hudson said, we're really only talking about the garage, which is nicely tucked into the side of the hill. I can support the project because I think overall it has such merit.
Commissioner Calverdine.
I can count to three, but I'm still going to vote again. I'm still opposed to the project because I think it is inconsistent with the neighborhood. I'll just leave it at that.
I'm going to vote for this. I can just say I agree with everything Commissioner Hudson said. What was really important to me was looking at the site and looking to the neighbor to the south, and the fact that there's a retaining wall that really mirrors where the garage and casita on top of it is. I think it's a creative solution. And I also agree that we should recommend the waiving of the engineering condition regarding the widening of the street. I think this is, it's the charm of the neighborhood that these streets aren't boulevards.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Never mind, I take it back.
And so what I'd look for at this point is I think we have, I think I would take a motion from Commissioner Hudson.
And Madam Chair, if I can just add something here. In terms of the requirement relative to the streets, we would request that the language be a deferral of the requirement to widen the streets in case there is a need at some point in the future.
We have a motion and a second by Commissioner Hirschbein. To the neighbors, especially the neighbor who said that this might be more modern, I think intermixed in this neighborhood, I just wanted to say that it are a number of newer modern houses, and I don't think it'll take away from the charm of the neighborhood because it is eclectic. It'll just add one more element. Do you want to call the roll? This passes 4 in favor, 1 opposed. Moving on to other business. Planning Commission reports, requests, and comments. I will have a request, but are there other reports, requests, and comments? Maybe we could get a report. You've done several subcommittee meetings. Can you fill us in on what's happened? And at some point, it would be great to get notes from subcommittee meetings where you make decisions.
Yes, we met with the applicant, the architect. We met with the architect for the Legacy assisted living project and clarified certain architectural conditions that were not clear from the previous drawings. He agreed to provide some additional architectural drawings to the, first of all, he described to us the intent, and we agreed with the intent of what he was describing, but we want it documented for the approval process. And so he agreed to do that. So he will be bringing that back on the January 10th meeting date. Does that cover it?
I would add he's also going to provide a materials board, because that was a major concern.
There was a subcommittee meeting consisting of myself, Mr. Callardine, and Mr. Rotman from the AAC to look at the landscaping along the northern perimeter of the site on Hills. What's the name of the street?
Hillview Cove.
Hillview Cove. And as you recall, the concern we have is, of course, this gentleman was here earlier today to talk about the solar panels north of the site being affected by the plantings that the applicant wanted to put in place. What we had originally hoped we would be able to get them to provide to us is a planting concept where the plants, by nature of their DNA, for want of a better term, are such that the plants would never grow to a height beyond the 12 feet that we all felt acceptable for purposes of ensuring that adequate light go to the solar panels. According to the architect's landscape person who was with us, there is really no guarantee that any plant won't continue to grow and grow. We also had to deal with the issue of the very high palms on the northwest corner and northeast corner of the property. With respect to those, they've agreed to take those out and put in what are called blue palms. Apparently, a blue palm will first be installed at about 6 to 7 feet in height, and they grow a half an inch a year. So with respect to those, we felt safe in allowing those. The others are the olive trees, and the olive trees can grow to higher heights, and we agreed that finally, as we've done in the past, we will have a monitoring system whereby we will have code enforcement watching this, and we will watch it. The city will be careful, and certainly the neighbors will be vigilant, and if those trees grow beyond the heights that's determined in the conditions of approval, there will be an enforcement issue to deal with. That was the way we resolved it, and I think it was a fair resolution, given the practicalities of the facts.
My understanding is this will have to come back.
It will.
To the commission
Right.
as an agendized item at a future meeting.
Yes, I believe that Mr. Lyon has already sent out notices to the adjacent neighbors, as this is a hillside lot, and we are identifying January 10th as the date to discuss that added condition or revised condition.
Is that just the landscape part of the whole project?
It's only the landscape that we will be addressing as part of that revision to the conditions that were imposed on the project.
Are there other items, people? The other item I wanted to bring up is putting together a subcommittee to work with staff on a conversion or a golf course conversion ordinance, looking at some of the better model ordinances that have come out of Florida. We have some golf courses we anticipate will convert. They are 50% of our open space in the city, and the importance of maintaining there is an importance to maintaining some of that, but there's very little we can do without a suggested ordinance that we could send to council. One of the city councilors has asked that we do this, and it's something that I would like to set up. I talked with Flynn about it. My suggestions, I would like to work on it. If there aren't other people, Commissioner Callardine would like to work on it. I don't know if other members of the commission would be interested. I'm not finding, but I think a two-member subcommittee does work on issues like this, and we might be having a chance to work with a staff person who might be leading this. Do you want to talk about that, Flynn?
Yes, I would recommend that Mr. Newell be the staff person to work on this proposed ordinance with you all in terms of doing the research and providing staff support, and he has agreed to do that.
No.
Would it make sense to add a member of AAC, since you're dealing with vast expanses of landscaping and issues, water issues, and all sorts of?
I think as long as the member of AAC isn't conflicted.
I know having Mr. Rotman in our subcommittee on our Hillview project was a great help.
I think that would be that would be excellent, actually.
Yes, our city attorney assures us that having one representative from AAC will not be a problem, so we'd be happy to ask one of them to represent at the subcommittee.
Good.
And so therefore, the subcommittee will be Chair Wermuck and Vice Chair Callardine with one member of the AAC, and Mr. Newell will then be the staff support for that subcommittee.
On a different note, and I'm not sure that there still is a request, we had gotten an earlier request from a member of the City Council to work with members of the HSPB on a demolition, it would be a demolition ordinance and possibly a ordinance that revolves the start date of when something is determined to be historic. But are we starting that at this point, or are we waiting until that goes as a formal request to City Council?
It has gone as a letter from the HSPB to City Council. At their meeting yesterday, they did that by resolution, and so we'll forward that to City Council. We will look to direction from City Council in terms of the start date for that. What we had originally discussed with them was that sometime in January or February, we would probably start to look at that in serious.
And, yes.
On my calendar for tomorrow, I had listed a Planning Commission and Sustainability joint meeting for the 14th of December.
No, we do not have that. I don't know how that crept on your calendar.
I wonder if David Friedman mentioned that. Were we planning on getting together with Sustainability?
No, I don't know of anything on that date.
All right, never mind.
But we'll come back to that, the HSPB issue. And then the only other item is, I believe, on the 18th, City Council is doing interviews for new plan, the 18th of this month. City Council, 3:30 to 4:30?
Let's see, I believe that starts at 2:30. That has been posted on the city's website. And so they're doing interviews for Planning Commission. I believe there's one other commission for which they're doing interviews as well.
Prop J, I think.
So does that mean that at our next meeting we'll have new members?
We don't know what they will do. It does mean that if people have people that they think would make good commissioners, you might want to contact them and talk to them about submitting applications. Thank you. That's Flynn, do you have?
I don't have anything for you other than there is a celebration of the opening of the businesses downtown tomorrow at 4 p.m. is when that starts off. The AAC and the Planning Commission members have been invited to attend, as well as members of the general public. So again, we're celebrating those improvements.
Where's the celebration going to be held itself?
The celebration will be held on the New Street Museum Way, which extends from Palm Canyon to the Art Museum.
Will Bellardo be open the whole way?
I don't know that Bellardo will be open in its entirety yet, but the first block, the southern block, is open up to the New Street.
And Flynn, is there a reason they set this as the same day as the Walk of the Inns and Street Fest and everything? I mean, they seem to...
It wasn't intended to coincide with the Village Fest, so it starts off before Village Fest kicks off and then culminates with fireworks at the end of Village Fest.
With that, I'm going to adjourn this.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays, yes, happy holidays, everyone, and we're adjourned until January 10th at 10:30 for a special session.